In continuation of our series on primary sources, and in support of the previous video on massacres in the Mongol invasion of Khwarezm, in this video, we will look at how the Persian writer Juvaini presents the fall of Nishapur to Mongol forces in 1221. Nishapur, in modern-day Iran, was famed for its pottery, but its almost total destruction by the Mongols is one of the most famous episodes of the Khwarezmian campaign. Initially, Nishapur had submitted to the forces of Zev and Subutai during their pursuit of Khwarezm Shah Muhammad in 1220, but threw off Mongol rule a few months later after hearing rumors of Mongol defeats. Late in 1220, Chinggis Khan's son-in-law Tokuchar was sent to bring the city to heel, and his death outside the walls would seal the city's fate. Chinggis Khan's youngest son, Tolui, devastated the major cities of Khwarezm in spring 1221, sending his armies towards Nishapur after destroying Merv. When Tokuchar arrived with the great emirs and 10,000 men as Tolui's vanguard, and rode up to the gates of Nishapur in the middle of November, the people of the town conducted themselves with furious courage, and since their numbers were great, and those of the Mongols less, they made frequent sallies and engaged in battle. And being wary of life, they wrestled with lions, and despite the crocodiles, they embarked in boats, only to be torn to pieces. Until the third day, they fought fiercely over the tower of Karakush, and discharged quarrels and arrows from the walls and ramparts. By an evil chance, which was to be the bane of all that people, an arrow was let fly, whereby Tokuchar fell lifeless, the townsmen having made an end of him without recognizing his person. The Mongol army retired in the course of the day, and 2 prisoners escaped and came to the town with tidings of his death. Whereupon the people thought that they had wrought a great deed, not realizing that, after a time, he shall surely know its message. The people of Nishapur were engaged in open revolt, and wherever a detachment of Mongols appeared, thither they would send bravos to seize them. That winter prices rose very high in Nishapur, and the people were prohibited to leave the town, and for this reason, most of them were in great distress. When the spring of 1221 came round and Tolui had finished with Merv, he set out for Nishapur, none knowing of his approach. He collected and dispatched so large an army that in the region of Tus they seized all the villages with one blow and reunited with their companions all that had escaped the sword. He also sent a large army in advance to Shadiak with the mangonels and other weapons, and although Nishapur is in a stony region, they loaded stones at a distance of several stages, and brought them with them. These they piled up, and not the 10th part of them were used. The people of Nishapur saw that the matter was serious, and that these were not the same men they had seen before. And although they had 3,000 crossbows in action on the wall, and had set up 300 mangonels and ballistas and laid in correspondent quantity of missiles in naphtha, their feet were loosened, and they lost heart. They saw no hope, save in sending the chief Qari, Rukin-ad-Din, to Tolui. When he reached him, he asked for quarter for the people of Nishapur, and agreed to pay tribute. It was of no avail, nor was he himself allowed to return. At dawn on Wednesday, the 7th of April, 1221, they filled the cup of the morning draught of war and fought fiercely until midday prayers on the Friday, by which time the moat had been filled in several places and a breach made in the wall. And because other fighting was fiercer at the gate of the camel drivers and in the tower of Karakush, and there was more warriors engaged in these parts, the Mongols raised their standard on the wall of Khusro Kush, and going up fought with the men on the rampart, while a force from the gate of the camel drivers also ascended the fortifications. And all that day until nightfall they continued to mount the walls, and to push the people down from the top. By the Saturday night all the walls and fortifications were covered with Mongols, and on that day Tolui himself had arrived. The Mongols now descended from the walls, and began to slay and plunder, and the townspeople fought back, dispersed among the palaces and mansions. The Mongols looked for Mujir al-Mulk, and dragged him out of a tunnel. In order that he might the sooner be drawn out of the noose of life, he spoke harsh words to them, and they finally put him into a disgraceful death. They then drove all the survivors, men and women, out onto the plain, and in order to avenge Tokuchar, it was commanded that the town should be laid waste in such a manner that the site could be plowed upon, and that in the exaction of vengeance not even cats and dogs should be left alive. A daughter of Chinggis Khan, who was the chief wife of Tokuchar, now entered the town with her escort, and they slew all the survivors save only 400 persons who were selected for their craftsmanship and carried off to Turkestan, where the descendants of some of them are to be found to this day. They severed the heads of the slain from their bodies and heaped them up in piles, keeping those of the men separate from those of the women. After which, when Tolui decided to proceed to Herat, he left an emir with 400 Tajiks to dispatch in the wake of the dead all the survivors that they found. Flies and wolves feasted on the breasts of satyrs. Eagles on the mountaintops regaled themselves with the flesh of delicate women. Vultures banqueted on the throats of houris. The land hath died for loss of them that have left it. It is as though they had been its soul. Abodes and dwelling places were leveled with the dust. Palaces, which in loftiness had vied with Saturn in their abasement, professed humility like the earth. Mansions were far removed from pleasure and prosperity. Castles, after all their haughtiness, fell at the feet of abjections. Rose gardens became furnaces, and the rose of the land became a level plain. Aye, calamities have enslaved it, and its bills have become lowly things accustomed to kneeling. Upon my oath, its aloe wood is like damp mandel in dryness, and its oil like pounded musk. Juvaini, who we have quoted from extensively on this channel, is among our most important sources on the early Mongol Empire. Writing in the 1250s, he was a high-ranking civil servant of the Mongols for decades. Though he was born after the conquest of Khwarezm, his father and grandfather had both been servants of the Khwarezm Shahs and provided him with eyewitness descriptions of events. While being a servant of the Mongols, as we have discussed prior, he does celebrate those few who successfully resist them, like Jalal al-Din Mingburnu, and laments the destruction of so many Muslim cities. What we see in his discussion of Nishapur reflects so much of his writing elsewhere on the invasion, cursing the inhabitants for short-sightedness and poor decisions, and depicting the Mongols as a sort of unstoppable wave. While they could be slowed, they could not be stopped, and Nishapur's fall is presented as only far too inevitable. Sometimes online you will see Nishapur as having 1.8 million killed there within a single hour by Mongol forces. But as we saw here, Juvaini provides no such statement. Such statements probably come from confusion with Juvaini's other descriptions of the destruction of cities by the Mongols. Merv in particular being said by the historian as having lost over 1 million residents. Note how this connects to our previous video on massacres. Zev and Subaday's forces initially accepted Nishapur's submission almost peacefully, killing only a cavalry group which rode out against them. Unable to partake in a long siege, they wanted it only to provide tribute and necessities to help continue on their pursuit, appointing a governor and demanding the fortifications be removed. When Nishapur ultimately rose up and killed an imperial prince, they ensured they would receive only the harshest of punishments, and few things send a message better than towers of severed heads. It was for this devastating campaign of reprisal in Khorasan that Tolui earned himself the reputation of the most bloodthirsty and warlike of all Chinggis Khan's sons, the most like their father in terms of military ability.